Women Up Radio, designed to facilitate women's empowerment, improve your career, develop your talents, incorporate your passions, achieve fulfillment and success.
Hello, this is Women Up Radio supporting Empower Women, and today we're talking about transition, change and career reorientation, particularly and even for sports stars. I'm joined in the studio by my guest Julie Schladitz, specialist in professional development, career coach for athletes, as well as senior executives in international companies. Julie has worked at the intersection of the sports and the business world for over 3 decades, including time on the International Olympic Committee, which I am fascinated to hear more about. Anyway, welcome to the program, Julie.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Julie, tell me about your career. How did you start and what drew you to the mixture of competitive sport, which is really at its highest level with you, and also to international business?
Well, I started my career actually almost at the International Olympic Committee in Lausanne. So starting out as a very young, fresh person from university, and I'd always been interested in sport. Not particularly participating, although I did play table tennis when I was younger, but just loved it. So for me, it was an absolute dream job. I was there at the IOC. I traveled internationally. I went to the Sarajevo Winter Games and the Los Angeles Olympics in 1984. So really experienced, the spirit of the games, the Olympic movement. It was absolute fantastic time. I met my husband, so then had to move away from the IOC into Zurich and worked still in sport at the World Federation of the Sporting Goods Industry, which is a slight difference, obviously, from the IOC, but it did cooperate with the IOC on projects like the Olympic Day Run. So I saw sport more from a commercial perspective there. But that was the beginning of my career. My husband moved to Bern, so I followed him and left the sports world completely and then went into international business. And I had no experience at all of HR. I'd applied for a job in the Swiss watch industry, a very basic job, but they wanted somebody with English, French and German, and that was the way my languages are, obviously being English mother tongue. I applied. And they took me for an interview and they said, well, actually, what we're looking for is a mother hen. Will you do it? I'm like, okay, apparently I was 29 at the time. The other was in the office were like 24, 25, very junior. And I presume they thought that extra 5 years of experience meant I could be a mother hen.
Lovely.
And for them, exactly, that mother hen was HR manager. So with no experience of HR or the business world at all, I was so lucky. I became an HR manager. I obviously did all the training as well at the same time. But on my first day, I remember the sales director came into me and said, Julie, we've got this really interesting or very important recruitment this afternoon. We'd really appreciate your professional advice. Can you tell us what you think? My first day, I had no idea what HR was or recruitment. I think I very politely said, but I've only just joined the company. I don't know anything about the company, and I got out of it. I gave myself then time to actually find out what HR was. So I spent then the next 25 years basically in the Swiss watch industry, in international HR. Took a short break, because I was worldwide HR director for a company, traveling the world, and I had small children. And so, I was going to Japan, going to Hong Kong, going to the US. And at the time, it was very useful because my parents from the UK, I'd fly into the UK, drop them off, and then travel the world and work. And the moment they started school, I couldn't do that anymore. So big transition. I said, okay, I need to take a short break. So I took time off from the corporate world. Set up from home as a consultant, a little consulting, but I did a master's in organizational psychology, which took me 4 years. So I had that short break and then went back into the corporate world. And then in 2012, I decided to set up my own company. Had a clear view of what I wanted to do to really help people, as opposed to keep restructuring and downsizing or whatever else happens in the corporate world, to really say, okay, I got all this experience. And for a sporting perspective, I started my career in sport.
Yes.
Went into the world of work, into the profession, into HR, so really understanding, supporting the business, and almost like taking my career full circle, saying, what can I do? And decided that actually being a career coach, helping transition athletes out of the world, out of sport, into the world of work, because I'd seen when I was at the IOC, the issues they faced.
Yeah.
I thought it would be a great use of my experience. So having witnessed firsthand, obviously, this transition, I decided to come full circle and work with sports people. I have to say, I still work, I'm very happy to work with executives, professional women also looking to reorient their career. I tend to do a lot of work with, and I'm still a recruiter. So I'm still actively involved in that job market. But that basically is my career.
It's fascinating. And I love the fact that you've gone back to include sport and athletes, because I think that, as well as creative. For example, I'm big in dance and things like that. And when dancers have finished their career, what do they do next? It's the same thing as for athletes. They have very specific skill set. And if they try and go into the normal world of work, people don't necessarily think that they're suitable material. And that's the other thing that really interests me about what you do, because of the transition. If somebody wants to do something completely different, even if it's corporate, from one sector to something totally at the opposite end of the spectrum, it can be quite difficult to be accepted. So I know with athletes, the discipline is really phenomenal. So to get to that stage, they must find it really difficult, have a lot of challenges. If you work with athletes to help them in their career, what do you do to inspire them? Because I'm sure this actually is the same for people in any sector. When they're beginning to find it a struggle, or when things aren't going right, it's difficult to get inspiration. But particularly for something where the demand and the discipline, like there is in sport, is so great. How do you inspire them? What do you do to give them the courage to keep going?
To keep going, well, I think that's probably twofold. To keep going in their sport, funnily enough, they managed to do it quite well. I mean, you could see the resilience. I coach a lot of people, for example, ice hockey. They constantly come into me with concussion, and yet, or they, they're not being picked by the coach, whatever, and they inspire them. They have such dedication to their sport that actually they just keep going. They have this inner strength, which I think is phenomenal. And so they don't really inspire for career afterwards. Yes, that's where I give my support. But actually, any difficulties they're encountering at the top, within their sporting career, I'm always astonished. They always manage to get up and go. They always bounce back. Even if the coach isn't picking them, they see the positive side. I'll keep working, or, the third concussion, don't worry, I'm going to go to the US and get treated. I'll be back. It's, they inspire me more with their resilience and their determination.
Incredible. And can you compare that in any way, their resilience and their determination, to professionals who want to become senior executives? Because obviously everyone has to start at the bottom and work their way up. So they must have some big challenges as well. I mean, I was thinking the challenges that athletes face, but in business, there are similarities and differences, I think. Do you think so, or am I barking up the wrong tree?
No, I mean, there are similar. I mean, obviously, the business world can learn a lot from the sporting world, but then the sporting world also has to adapt if they want to go into the business world. I mean, I'll give you some examples. You talked about, obviously, this determination and focus. Absolutely, that's really important in the business world, and I think that's what they need if you're starting off as an executive. Well, you don't start as an executive, do you? But to know that if you really want to get to the top level, you do need that determination, that focus. the resilience as well, the coping skills when maybe it doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
So that I think is similar. I think things like team spirit, hard work, attention to detail, all that we can learn, and somebody that wants to really go well into an executive position can also really be inspired by sports people from that perspective, the goal orientation as well, leadership, teamwork. There's a lot that they can take observing sport and inspiring and using those skills to go forward. However, and this is what I always point out to my athletes, they have such wonderful transferable skills, but they have things that don't transfer, and they have to be careful. And things like, for example, take a footballer. In football, you quite often change clubs. Sometimes you don't even have the choice, but you're there for a year, you get a better contract offer, whoops, you're off. Again, a year later, somebody comes in with a better offer, you're off. And it's not, they can have 4 to 5 clubs in maybe 6 to 8 years. There's no problem. The same thing can be a risk in the business world where they come in, they still have their reputation, they've got a job, and 6 months later, somebody will come to them and go, but don't work there, come for us, I've got far more money. And a year later, what are you doing there? Come to me. And you'll find that if they have changed jobs to the same frequency as they've changed clubs, their CV is going to look like a job hopper, and they're not going to be unemployable. So I think there's certain things that definitely can inspire people, executives, but there's certain things you have to say stop. And things like also feedback. For example, in sport, their feedback is immediate, it's fairly brutal. The hairdryer treatment, whatever, in the change rooms. If you're going into a world of work and you're trying to manage people, you start doing things like, obviously not the hairdryer, but being so brutal and so upfront with things that aren't working, suddenly you'll find yourself being called in by HR and saying that you're bullying your team. So, you can be inspired by what happens in sport, but sport, on the other hand, also has to look out for what they need to change if they're moving into a business environment.
You are listening to Anna Letitia Cook at Women Up Radio.
So when athletes do decide to change careers, are there many options open to them? And what's the expectations that business people have of someone who's coming from the world of sport?
I think the options are very different, actually, for people. Each athlete is different. You've got some people that combine their athletic career with university studies, for example, or a part-time job. And I think these people, for them to change careers, there are many more options available because they've already started the process. It's not a change from one day to the next. They have acquired some skills. They've demonstrated time management, determination, focus. So they have possibly more options. In Switzerland, for example, because that's where I'm based, the banks or the insurance companies tend to actually contact athletes at the end if they read in the paper someone's retiring and say, come and work for us.
Really?
Because of the network. Yeah, because the contact insurance companies and banks specifically in the past, I think they've stopped slightly now. But yeah, absolutely. They like their contacts. So that's it. There are options, but then others have no options at all. Bearing in mind they're years behind their peers professionally, even if they've studied. If they've been training and competing for 15 to 20 years, the people they're up against, and I think you mentioned this earlier on, have so much more experience. So who do you take if you're a hiring manager? Somebody who, of course, has shown resilience and hard work and determination, but has no practical experience against somebody who's got 15 years. And some companies will jump at ex-athletes, so the options are there. But my experience as a recruiter, sometimes when I presented CVs of athletes, is no, thank you, we want people with experience. So, so it is challenging. And I think you said that earlier yourself, didn't you? That it's, well, actually, it is tough. Well, for the dancers, I think that was the example you used, huh?
Yes, because dance is my passion, particularly ballet. So I know there's a definite time limit And also if they don't make it to be the number one ballerina or something like that, not everyone wants to be in the corps de ballet all the time. They want to do something else. And normally, particularly with ballet and very much with sport as well, I think, you start quite young being a star and doing your dance or your sport training. So you don't do the same education as you would in a normal school. So you just don't have the same business type background or general type background. So it can be very negative. But it's really, I'm very, very interested with you saying about the banks and the insurance companies. I would never have expected that in a million years.
Yeah. So you have quite a few, ex-sports stars actually working in insurance companies. Also, because within insurance, there's on the job training, so they can come in. The insurance companies train them, and then they go out with all their contacts. They can flourish in the insurance world. Apparently, that's not necessarily always a good match, but it is what happens.
Yes, yeah, and with it, I mean the same question about the options for somebody who's in corporate, if they want to have a complete career change, is that similar, the options or the challenges? Is it similar to athletes changing careers, or is it a different vision?
I think it's slightly easier because they have past experience to leverage. It depends how dramatic the change you want to be. But and this is going on to a different topic, mid-career, 50 plus. That has its challenges all on its own. Exactly. And that is, well, then you exactly, the challenges, don't you? So if you're mid-career, you're changing, fine. But if you happen to be mid-career and over 50, then it's going to be tough. Go self-employed.
Yeah. I know. I had that when I moved to France. I think I was 46 or 45 or something like that. And I thought about getting a normal job. And they laughed at me and they said, 1, you're too old, and 2, you're unstable. And I was like, what do you mean I'm unstable? They said, you've had too many different careers. I was like, okay. So I was like, right, better change, do something different. So, and do you find, obviously, because this is a program particularly to help women and to help their development, do you find in all of the work that you do, particularly for the athletes and the senior executives, are the options open to women very different to those for men? And what career changes do you think are better or more easily transitioned?
Talking about from a sports perspective, their transition is anything from early 30s up to late 30s, depending on the sport. You've got footballers that might transition earlier than hockey players who tend to have a longer career. There, I don't think there's any difference, or I'm talking from experience. So as a career coach and as a recruiter, I see no difference in options between men and women.
Oh, that's good.
However, very good. There is a however.
Right.
For the executives or any professional woman, this 50 plus is a key issue. It's a key issue for both. It hits woman harder. And again, it's my own observations. I haven't done research on it. But I did actually write an article. I wrote an article 2 years ago about finding work over 50 on LinkedIn. Got an amazing response. And I put out another one about 3 weeks ago. And again, the response was absolutely amazing. It is an issue. And yes, in my humble opinion, women are impacted far worse than men the moment it gets over 50. Men find jobs easier. Only my opinion.
You'll have to give me the link to those articles that I can put on the bottom so everyone can read those as well, because that sounds interesting.
Sure.
So, coming on to your book, you've written a wonderful book, Career After Sport, and I know it covers several of these topics. So what inspired you to write the book, and who do you think will benefit most from reading it, because in my opinion, it really applies to everybody. I mean, I know you're using sport as the main theme, the main topic, the main focus, but from what you're saying, I think it applies very much to the business world. So, sorry, I've gone round the houses there. What inspired you to write the book, and who do you think will benefit most from reading it?
Okay, so what inspired me? Obviously, my interest in sport, what I saw at the IOC when I was there, it really gave me an insight into the struggles. Obviously, not just limited to Olympians. Any professional sportsman has that struggle.
Yeah.
And I also had a tough transition myself, which is going to take time to explain. So you maybe want me to not tell you about that, but I'm quite happy to share it at a later stage if you want. And so having experienced how to transition, what I needed to do to cope when I lost my identity, when I was transitioning out of an executive role, I just thought, well, let's put it all together to help people. But you're right, athletes, but not just athletes, their partners, for example. When an athlete retires, obviously there's a loss of identity. You take the sport away from the athlete, and what is left? Well, nothing. It's very tough. But for the partner as well, the spouse, the partner, if they've identified with what the person has done, it's almost like, well, where does that leave me? What about me?
Yes.
And
I never thought of that.
Yeah, it's a tough issue, and they bear the brunt of the person's insecurities. So an athlete maybe withdraws socially, gets upset, maybe anger, sadness. All this has been documented in the research.
Yeah.
And who's taking the brunt of that? Well, the partner. And at the same time, going through their own transition.
Yes.
And the divorce rate among ex-athletes is high.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah. So the book is useful to people, not just athletes, close to athletes, the partners, the family.
Yeah.
But as you rightly said, actually, I identified 12 criteria necessary for transition, and actually 11 out of the 12 are completely transferable to any other profession. So yes, it's got some great tips, if I could dare say that, for anybody that's transitioning in their career.
Wonderful. I'd recommend people to definitely get it and read it, because I think it would be very helpful. Anyone that's moving in a different direction or thinking about it, definitely something to read. So as a final question, Julie, what tips or advice would you give to someone who's thinking about changing their career or a complete reorientation? And what do you think will help them achieve their new dream?
If I can just, so initially just say to the sports person, and then I'll address it generally.
Yeah.
I first of all congratulate them actually in contemplating the change.
Yeah.
Because most push it to the back of their minds. They don't want to deal with it. It's like the elephant in the room. Let's just not. And preparation is key. So for that population, not tip or advice, but it's really congratulations. You're taking a huge step forward.
Yeah.
And then for the general population, if it's going to be really a complete career change, just reflect to begin. Take that time out to take a step back. Reflect what is important to them. Our values change over time. Something that perhaps we based our career on that was important to us in the past is perhaps no longer valid. And to achieve that new dream, you really need to identify what you want out of life. Yeah. So for me, it would be take a step back, identify what's important.
Yeah.
And then another thing is to test the career. Because often it's not what we think. Speak to people who do similar jobs, shadow them maybe, do an internship, find out exactly the good, the bad and the ugly.
Yeah.
Just get as much insight as possible, get a feel for it.
Yeah.
Because it's not uncommon for career change to happen gradually. It can take 2 to 3 years of testing.
Yes.
So really take your time, not only to know yourself, but to understand. And perhaps, if you really are having a career change, maybe you want to sort of test, gain insight into 2 or 3 possible avenues before you make that switch.
Great advice.
And then, if I could go back to the athletes finally, because again, this is key, ask for help. I mean, they don't wake up, one day and being a professional sports person. They put hard work training.
Yeah.
They've listened to advice and guidance and been coached all their athletic career.
Yeah.
So don't try to do it on your own now.
Yes.
Seek expert advice.
Yeah.
And look after yourself. So yes, I think those are my final words, final pieces of advice.
Perfect. Thank you. That's great advice. Obviously for athletes, but for everybody.
Yeah.
Because people just go off on one with an idea, with no research, no experience of what it's going to be like. So no, really great advice. Thank you so much, Julie. It's been a real pleasure having you on the show.
You're most welcome. It's been my pleasure to speak to you. Thank you, Anna.
We'd like to thank our guest, Julie Schladitz, specialist in professional development, career and transition coach for athletes as well as senior executives in international companies, for sharing her expertise on transition, change and total career reorientation. I'm Anna Letitia Cook. You've been listening to us at Women Up Radio. Thanks also to Meryl Guzel and Laura Martinez of UN Women's Empower Women for the wonderful work that they do to advance the case for women's equality today. And a big thank you to all of you who are listening in. I hope you've enjoyed hearing Julie. I definitely have. I love this area, so it's fascinating. Please